The story began 300 years ago, specifically in the 18th century, in the year 1730. It was the year in which the New World was declared after 7 years of preparation, when the remains of the greatest civilization that dominated the earth in the ancient era were discovered. The new people inherited this civilization with the age of its splendid construction and its eternal technologies, for it was a written history witnessed by construction and civilizational development of a Muslim empire. But Benjamin and the 300 founders had a cunning that could move mountains. It was the first vision written for the modern era. The vision of 1730 back then was based on erasing, falsifying and burning all that was of true history and rewriting it according to the perspective of the one secular state. This concept was also stolen from what preceded, for the first age of humanity emerged as one united nation. Then Tartaria appeared to replace it as a developed and advanced empire that dominated the entire world at the heart of Greater Asia. Many do not know that Greater Asia controlled all the lands of the sunset, or what is known today as Europe, for even the name Europe did not exist in ancient history, and the scholar in the first records understands this well. The maps of the Italians, the French, the Dutch, and the Hungarians all showed the history of the great civilization up until the year 1730, and here began the falsification, forgery, and reversal of facts as what was called the Age of Enlightenment began. And whoever reverses the meanings obtains the truth. And over 300 years since the first vision, religion, creed, values, and facts were overthrown. Human nature was reversed, and reality was changed. Under the name of revolution and the lie of Antoinette and the cake, the church was demolished toward irreligion. Under the pretext of science, man was attributed to apes, and to prove that which has no proof, dinosaurs were invented to support evolution. Finally, to establish the new era, it was necessary to burn entire cities to hide what remained of the great civilization, and what remained of it was left under the name of the last kingdom of Sami. And today, after 300 years since the first vision at the hands of the 300, the order was given to issue the final vision in the year 2030. The vision launched by the United Nations or the unified world in the forum of the true ruler in Davos of the 21st century. This is the vision of 2030, the story that will not be completed. At a notable historical turning point, the past 2 decades witnessed a wide spread of ambitious national plans bearing the title Vision 2030, from major economic powers to emerging countries, and from oil-dependent countries to diversified economies. The year 2030 suddenly became a global pivotal point for strategic planning and future aspirations. Even major economic powers such as the United States, China, India, Japan, Germany, the United Kingdom, and France made their economic forecasts and strategic plans centered greatly around this time horizon. The official narrative of this convergence appears clear and logical at first glance, as it was presented as national responses to the challenges and opportunities of the 21st century, driven by noble goals such as economic diversification to reduce dependence on natural resources. But all of them are closely linked to the United Nations Agenda 2030 as a global call to eliminate poverty, protect the planet, and ensure peace and prosperity for all. The question that comes to the mind of anyone researching in this field is this global synchronization around the year 2030 merely a coincidence? In other words, is it a natural result of good international cooperation and a shared desire for progress? Or does this convergence hide behind it deeper, undeclared motives and hidden forces working in the shadows? This documentary aims to dive deeply behind the official statements, exploring the doubts, criticisms, and theories surrounding the phenomenon of the year 2030 to understand the hidden reasons for this global focus on this specific date, in parallel with the presence of a strong central agenda for the United Nations. The matter raises inevitable questions about the existence of a grand design rather rather than just independent national planning. The Sustainable Development Plan for 2030, launched by the United Nations, forms the cornerstone of the official narrative surrounding this date. It represents the culmination of a negotiation process described as the most participatory in the history of the organization. In other words, the greatest event in modern history. The agenda proposed by the United Nations consists of 17 main goals for sustainable development and 169 associated targets designed to be integrated and indivisible. Focus well on this clause, indivisible, meaning it must be implemented as one single package. The United Nations also affirms that this agenda is a work plan that will apply to all human beings on the face of the earth, and that it will completely transform our world. Reading those words in the statement raises suspicion, so there had to be a fragrance to surround it and hide its trace. The United Nations revealed its agenda as a drawing of a bright future and promises of a world free from extreme poverty and hunger, where everyone enjoys good health, quality education, clean energy and potable water. A world where humanity lives in harmony with all and decisive actions are taken to confront climate change and protect biodiversity. That is, a world dominated by peaceful, just and inclusive societies governed by strong and accountable institutions. But this idealistic and promise-filled language was interpreted by Western skeptics, not Arabs, as a deliberate attempt to hide a more pragmatic agenda or even manipulation. The vast inclusiveness of the goals launched by the United Nations can be seen as an attempt to control everyone in all aspects of human life and governance in states. When the UN agenda stated its goal of transforming our world entirely, that implicitly means a level of control and interference that may not be explicitly disclosed. Therefore, the beautiful declared vision may only be a shiny facade for a set of more intrusive or controlling objectives. The broad scope of the goals makes them difficult to oppose, as any opponent to those noble goals that were presented will appear as someone opposing good things, which gives these agendas a protective shield and a shiny cover. Therefore, Western academics belonging to liberal schools have begun to suspect the existence of hidden and comprehensive plans towards a one-world government that subjects everyone. Despite the rosy image painted by official narratives, the plans for 2030, headed by the United Nations agenda, are increasingly being met with large numbers of skeptics, not just ordinary individuals, but from multiple academic and institutional sources. This paves the way for the emergence of alternative and more pessimistic interpretations. Focus well on some of what the SAT Free Academic Institution revealed when it mentioned that there is manipulation in the presentation that could lead to the following. First, the global paradox. Academic institutions see that presenting the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as global goals ignores the fact that global challenges such as poverty and pollution differ from one country to another, especially in the clause that portrayed humanity as a unified group with a collective mission. This could lead to the imposition of a one-size-fits-all law. The pronoun we was used in the document, and this method of presenting a global agenda expresses global leaders imposing an agenda rather than a true collective will, making it a law to govern all instead of a participatory approach. Second, the hidden policies that reinforce existing power structures. The critic Adam Send revealed that the Sustainable Development Goals work to reinforce the legitimacy of the liberal international economic system and to push capitalist interests more than to address challenges, because the non-binding nature of the goals makes them a gateway toward other goals. In simpler terms, adopting loose slogans without restriction or limits may be a means for a hidden power and authority to manipulate matters and control them. Third, failures of global implementation and unfulfilled promises. After years have passed since the launch of the 2030 Agenda, reports indicate that the progress achieved is far less than expected. Even the Secretary General of the United Nations acknowledged that halfway to 2030, the preparations for those bright goals have not been completed even 30%, and that they need at least until 2050. Nevertheless, 2030 remains the declared year for implementing the agenda, despite the unfulfilled promises, which means the promises failed while the authority to implement them remains. This leads to absolute control without any returns, that is, control towards one world. There are many American institutions, including academic ones, that see this announced agenda as nothing but a structural declaration of the one world ruling system according to the concept of the New World Order, which is now known as the Great Reset. This term is based on the demolition of all financial, social, and educational institutions towards a unified sovereign system ruling all the countries of the world. And if you look around you, or in any country you are in, isn't that what is happening today? Those institutions, whose sources we will mention at the end of the documents, revealed hidden goals behind adopting 2030 as the desired year, as follows. Some academic institutions believe that implementing the 2030 agenda requires international commitment that goes beyond local policies, resulting in the reduction of national state powers, i.e., direct interference in countries' decisions. This raises concerns about the possibility of using the slogans of global governance to implement a single global system. Also, some researchers express their concerns that certain clauses in the 2030 agenda, especially those related to changing patterns of life, production and consumption, may be used as a cover to impose deep societal transformations. For example, projects such as 15-minute cities are seen as well-intentioned initiatives on the surface, but globally, they may translate into closed and restricted urban models under the pretext of reducing carbon emissions, i.e., confining communities within strictly controlled cantons, exactly as China is doing now. Initiatives such as the Great Reset, launched by the World Economic Forum, have also raised academic questions about the possibility of concentrating power and wealth in the hands of international entities and large corporations under the pretext of restructuring the global economy post-pandemic. This is the answer to those who ask, why did the pandemic appear and then disappear? This concentration may lead, according to some critics, to the reduction of the role of the national state, even its dissolution, in a unified system. That is, all the world's economies will be in one hand, according to the 2030 agenda. Academics also fear the expansion in the use of digital technologies in managing daily life and the economy, i.e., abolishing paper money and replacing it with electronic money, imposing social credit systems and surveillance technologies. Without transparent legislative frameworks that ensure individual freedom, these things will turn into tools of social control. In other words, electronic money will reveal the balance of every individual in the world, and anyone who exits the matrix will have their funds frozen. Isn't this agenda very similar to all previous agendas that were proposed at the Great I Forum? All such forums outwardly promote brotherhood, equality, justice, enlightenment, and progress, while in truth they reflect other objectives. Isn't this what we are seeing the results of today? The shiny announcements hide future goals. Looking back to the Middle Ages, the aristocratic class used to feed the slaves good food in front of the public and crowds to win the people's favor and submission and pass their actions more broadly without their awareness. People don't look at enslavement but at how the slave is treated in front of them. Today, we see most of the world's rich own charitable organizations that act as a shield from accusations and suspicions, while the enlightened know it is an investment to achieve greater influence and ambition among the public. The concept of slavery today is no longer about torn clothes or a pale appearance, but has become with a necktie and titles. And through loans, the same thing happens in a way that deceives the deceived with the word humanitarian. In conclusion, while the world looks to 2030 as an agenda that brings good, some academics see it as the year that will launch the One World system and the Great Reset, the Golden One.